All right. Welcome back to Slot the Locks. I'm Tim.
And this is Mello.
All right. We're going to start off a little differently today. Not with a game, not a slot mechanic, not with an RTP debate that somehow ruins everyone's mood. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bigger and specifically how the internet changed gambling. And honestly, the internet changed all of us. If you start really thinking about it, it reshaped how we communicate, maybe good or bad, how we date, how we consume content, how we work, how we argue with strangers at 2 o'clock in the morning over things that certainly don't matter. And gaming wasn't immune to that at all.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. That's what's actually interesting about. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah,
This is
I
going to be a
came in.
fun episode.
I came in hot. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. What's interesting is gambling actually lagged behind a bit longer than most industries. Like music changed fast, movies changed fast, and we all know why the video stuff changed fast. We won't talk about that. Retail changed super fast, but gambling held on to older formats, older demographics for a very long time. And part of that was because traditional casino gambling worked incredibly well for the audience it already had and the strict regulations behind it. See, I added that. Land based casinos were built around comfort, long sessions, free drinks, physical environments, routine behavior, questionable cocktail waitress outfits, and eventually the industry had a problem. It aged out in the demographics. And for a long time, I think the industry underestimated how much younger players had completely different expectations because of growing up online. Faster content, shorter attention spans, social interaction, streaming culture, instant gratification, gamification, I think is another huge one. And the internet essentially trained people to expect to interact differently.
Exactly. Eventually, gambling started adapting to that slowly, I would say. And I think there's a variety of different reasons that we can kind of get into, but I wouldn't say through traditional slots or blackjack, but through this kind of weird new category of games that came out of crypto gambling, which are crash games, Plinko, Mine, Dice, games that look nothing like the casino. And somehow those games ended up changing the industry. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're still going to demo the games like we usually do, or at least a few games here. We're still going to break down mechanics as well. But this episode is really about how gambling changed because of the internet.
How gambling changed the internet. And this might be one of the biggest shifts the industry has seen in our lifetime, I think, because crypto native gambling didn't just create new games, it changed the pacing, it changed player expectation, something we talk about a lot, the design philosophy, obviously, player perception was another one, streaming culture, and I think even how people think collectively about fairness.
Yeah, so let's we always talk about the framework, but let's kind of get into again the framework of perception, probability, design. And honestly, this category may be the purest version of that framework we've ever covered.
Yeah, and just to briefly sum up what this is. So the perception is as a player, you can beat this. The probability is odds are stacked against you, you probably can't. And the design is to make it fast enough and interactive enough where you keep trying to outdo the probability with your perception. Anyway, I swerved that. Sweet. I weaved it. There you go.
All right, before we jump in a little further, I certainly want to just stop here and say, we have a bunch of people that watch our content. Thank you for watching it. Make sure you like, subscribe, so you get updates on the newest content itself. And yeah, if you played these games, love to hear what you have to think as well about them. So let's start with the obvious question: why did crypto gambling happen in the first place? Because it wasn't just, oh, crypto exists now. There's a real gap in the market. Traditional online casinos still looked and felt like digital versions of physical casinos. Big lobbies, heavy beams, long sessions, older UX design. Meanwhile, internet native audiences were growing up on Twitch, Discord, YouTube, competitive games, social media, instant feedback loops. You think about TikTok, where that really started a lot of it as well. But then eventually someone realized, what if gambling felt more like the internet itself?
Yeah, exactly. So Crypto gambling wasn't built at all like casinos. It was built like an online platform, just like TikTok for dancing, right? Fast deposits, the banking, fast withdrawals, global access, very little friction points on the transaction, and I think the games somewhat reflected that. Keep in mind these games stripped down their pure math, their speed, volatility, and their reaction. There were no giant narratives. There's no Egyptian themes. There's no dragons protecting free spins. There's barely any IP, if there is any. It's risk, outcome, moving on to the next one.
Yeah, and I should call out. We should probably call out here that a lot of these crypto casinos would play in gray area or black markets that a lot of the traditional online casinos weren't.
That's a
And
shocker.
that's, yeah, exactly. But years ago, I remember working, that's maybe a side story with this company, but I remember a company was doing something a little bit different beside games, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But I think it was Funfair, and they were building out a crypto mechanism where the instant withdrawals and deposits, and what they did is to break it down, or what they were trying to do is if you traditionally go to online casino, you make a deposit through like a credit card or ACH or something like that. You play games, and if you win, you then had to request a withdrawal. It then goes through a payments, team and operator itself, and it could take days before you get the money itself. So Funfair actually was building something where it was on chain, which basically means you would request a bet, it would take it off the blockchain into a temporary wallet. And as you played, If you won, right when you closed the game, the money would be sent back to your wallet. I don't know if it fully adopted, but the idea here, when you just mentioned about fast withdrawals and fast deposits and things like that, that was really around the friction itself. So, you know, I know that's a side tangent, but I just wanted to call that out. Going back to what we were talking about, traditional casinos were built around the physical space itself. Crypto gaming was built around the internet behavior, and there's a huge difference there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one is like we said, designed around the comfort, the atmosphere, long sessions. Breathing in that amazingly strange scented air, and the other is designed around speed, streaming, and instant reactions from a game perspective as well as a financial perspective.
And that changes the games completely.
You have Crash, you have Mines, you have Plinko. These aren't casino floor games. They're internet games with a gaming component layered into them. I mean, they're kind of an equivalent to a high-low in a lot of ways, right? You would agree?
Pretty, yeah, I would say so. And it's maybe really even simple, like games like growing up where we played War, or it was very, very simple games, but they're fast or speed, you know. I assume you played War growing up.
Yeah, I play War now with my little 5-year-old.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, these games sort of remind me. So IGT way back when had a game called The Multiplier, which was a very simple game. It had like a lock. You had to pick where the lock was, and based on how wide that space was, that was the risk you were actually willing to permit. And these are very similar to that.
Yeah, so let's talk about the first game. We'll demo it in just a moment here. Crash games, because this is probably the clearest example. You place a bet, the multiplier starts rising, and at some point it crashes. If you cash out before the crash, you win. If you wait too long, you lose everything. Simple mechanic, massive psychological impact.
And sometimes on these crash games, they don't actually crash, right? They just fly away. Is that a
No,
win? Or is that
well,
a drop?
the flyaway is the crash,
Oh, fly
effectively.
away.
So
So it's
it depends on the company.
oh, that was a tricky one because yeah, okay. And what makes these crash games fascinating is that the player kind of can actually participate in their own loss. They're making the decision as to when to bail out of this plane ride. And that is very different than slots. I mean, slots hide the decision. It's in the back. You push the number. There's a random number generator, as we've spoken about. Crash puts the decision kind of in your hands. It creates this emotional loop. How long are you willing to wait? I mean, when you're watching the plane go up and up and up, you're seeing the multiplier go up and up and up, and it kind of messes with your brain with you're at that. So you have the four factors. You have greed, discipline, regret, and overconfidence, all playing into that loop.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo what you just said, I think it's the beauty of the game because I might be more conservative player, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to cash out and do it in small increments, and I'll show you in a second here. And you might be more risky and be like, I'm going for broke, I'm going for the big win. So it appeals to both those, that greed aspect or discipline aspect that you're talking about. All right, crash might be one of the most important gambling mechanics in years because unlike slots, you decide when to leave.
And that changes everything from a psychological perspective. Because when you lose, it feels kind of like it's your fault. You failed yourself.
Exactly. You waited too long. One more second, one more multiplier.
And this is why crash games feel emotional in a completely different way than slots. You've actually made the decision, and, you know, based on the outcome, that decision is either guilt or pride, I guess. Is it pride? Would you call it pride?
Maybe.
Success.
Let's go with it. All right, let's share. Let's demo this one. Probably the cleanest example. There's a few different companies. Spribe is one of them, but Aviator is also, you know, one of their games as well. There's a few different companies that do this, but let's kind of jump into it.
Oh my! Oh, hold on this. This is actually Aviator and Spribe. This is actually IGT.
It's Spribe actually.
It's soft bet. This is one of the partners we bought.
Oh, I didn't realize they owned it. I thought.
I mean, they did back then. I don't know. I mean, I'm unaware of the specifics of. I know they had the back end. We did a lot of the data behind this. So yeah, it just dawned on me when you said Spribe. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
So let's play. So notice how visually simple this is. There's literally no clutter. That's pretty intentional.
Yeah, the game's basically a multiplier, time, and attention. It's just a few different things. As here, it shows you the previous history of how before it flew away, other games that will have a crash. But this line right here is just like the roulette, which is absolutely meaningless just because it hit black 10 times in a row. It's the exact same odds. So just because there's a lot of short cycles right here doesn't mean the next one could be a long cycle. And so that's just visually. This one is kind of, community-based gaming, trying to get a bunch of people and see how they're doing. Like, this is a huge run. Too bad we didn't bet this one. And then from here, you have a bet. You can auto bet, and auto cash out. So if you want to be safe, and if it gets two, I will auto cash out of here. But this one, I'm going to decide how long I actually want to go. So really simple, but you'll see as we play through it how easy it is.
Yeah, so these games tend to generate extremely high engagement because rounds resolve incredibly quickly, typically, not like the last one. And that's compared to traditional casino games. Back at IGT, this was actually a specific data call out from the acquisition too, because this game was just, it was basically the lion's share of the game performance of the company we bought.
If you saw the last two, they basically flew away. The last three flew away almost immediately. And that's where the map kind of gets you.
Which is kind of odd given how long that previous one was, to have two short cycles just like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There you go.
Okay,
So
I think
one about one.
I think everybody understands this. It's pretty clear. You fly a plane, you crash, and maybe you get a 69x, but more than likely you're going to get a 1 to.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about this in a minute, but this is another one of games mines. Won't spend too much time with it, but it's as simple as just picking before you get a mine. You can keep picking, you can cash out at any time, but I'm going to keep picking. Hopefully I don't get a mine.
Wow,
you can see how, so it was on a roll there, right? Until you jinx me. And the next one, let's talk about Plinko. And yes, we have to mention this. The Price is Right, because everyone knows Plinko is from there. It's one of those games that I know we're probably going to date ourselves when we say that, even though it's still around. But I also want to say shout out to Happy Gilmore and the Bob Barker scene. If you guys haven't seen that movie, I would argue it's one of the best golf movies of all time.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely glad you prefaced it as one of the best golf movies.
Hey,
I mean, can you think of
Tin Cup,
Bagger Vance. Yeah. There's not
Caddyshack.
A whole lot of. Oh, Caddyshack is one of the best golf movies of all time.
Yeah, but the scene with Bob Barker and Happy Gilmore.
I mean, that scene, I think in comedy, I think that scene, and when in Ace Ventura, when he beats up the San Diego chicken, those two scenes are iconic. I mean, really.
100%.
Anyway, but moving forward, but crypto gambling turned it into something else entirely. I think what makes Plinko interesting is you can literally watch randomness as it happens. And we're going to do that right here, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The balls fall. The ball falls, or the balls fall. That's not easy to say, by the way. It bounces. You see the probability unfolding visually. That's your perception right there.
All right. And that's important. Most gambling hides the maths. Plinko visualize it, even though you still probably lose in the long term. Probably not. Probably you do. But most gambling games hide the math. Plinko puts it directly in front of you.
Yeah, you're literally watching the probability happen in real time. You see the balls bouncing up and down, left and right. You know where the big numbers are to hit. And sadly, in this case, you just kind of see them all walking right in the middle and, near misses. You will eventually get, I'm hoping we eventually get one to the far right.
Oh,
There you
40 high.
go. But yeah. So yeah, we did get a big multiplier there. So that's good.
And somehow it makes it feel a little more fair.
Even though we always have to remind people that there's a house edge on all of these games. There's no system to beat.
Yeah, and I should say this. And I can't remember if we will get into this, but that created a fairness thing where you could see all the random outcomes and stuff like that. It was visible to players, which is not in the real money space itself. So you could see, to make sure if they said it's paying back 95%, it's going to pay back 95%. You can see every single transaction. It was showing on there itself.
Okay, so here, and I think this is key. So here you're betting at 30-cent increments, and those 5 in the middle, those are all losses, right? Or no, the 3 in the middle are losses.
Yeah, so it's zero. It depends how risky I'm getting. So I'm playing the red balls. So if I'm playing red balls, I make a lot more. If I'm a gambler, like I love volatility. If I'm a little more a cautious gambler itself, I can play greens, and it's more spread evenly. Now, why is this 50 cents? That doesn't exactly make sense, but
no, yeah, you're basically picking your volatility.
exactly. So super easy, and it's visible. Everything's visible, and that was the whole point of crypto gaming as a whole.
Yeah, the ball pattern's not changing, just the amount.
Yeah, so I believe this. I get half my bet back, so 15 cents, and this is my full bet back. Probably easier to see if I actually bet one. For some reason I can't. All right, so here's. I think we'll get into a little more about streamers and stake.com and the content era. And here's where things get really changed. Crypto gambling explodes along streaming culture.
Yeah, so the category was built to be watched, and that's the difference, right? So you got the huge wins, your fast outcomes, social reaction, instant gratification, there's chat interactions. They're specter friendly, right? I mean, they don't really do like an esports thing with these, do they?
No, but esports is probably another category we may want to cover as well. And esports bet.
So many, Tim, so many.
And then platforms like Stake, as Miss mentioned, understood this very, very early, which got them extremely popular. And so traditional casinos were built to be played. Crypto native games were built to be watched.
I think that's why they were born through streaming, and that's why that streaming mattered so much. These games create instant reaction. You have your huge swings, clip moments. There's not a whole lot of explanation. You don't have the multi-lions, multi-ways. You don't have that mess. So yeah.
Yeah, and the internet turned gambling into content.
And as we all know, content changes the business.
Yeah, so let's kind of fast forward a little bit to why regulated gaming kind of copied it or adopted it. Eventually the traditional industry noticed. At first, a lot of people dismissed these games, too simple, too fast, too weird.
And yeah, the numbers showed up. I mean, I can't imagine people when they built Aviator thought the numbers would be what they were. And then essentially everyone wanted these crash games, multiplier mechanics, instant gameplay loops. I mean, acquisitions were made on essentially, operators who had these games.
I'll just say I think this has been an ongoing debate, and maybe we'll cover this in a different one, which is the industry is always, as long as I've been in it, which has been way too long, has always talked about how do we capture a younger audience, because our audience, the older demographic is going to age out or they're going to die at some point. And how do you attract a newer audience? It's funny to me that the industry as a whole pushed back into the games because they were stupid games or whatever they want to say. They weren't fun. They wouldn't work. And this whole genre of these games and these players were, which were the player databases that are playing these games are considerably younger. And so I think they were missing the boat for a very long time. But I will contend that it's not just the games, it's also the whole streaming aspect. I really don't think regulated gaming has figured that out. However, you see companies like Evolution and Spribe, like we just were demoing here a moment ago, started building a lot of this content, and you're starting to see a lot of these games in the regulated space itself. And the line between crypto native and regulated gaming keeps shrinking, although I think there's still some glaring differences between the two.
I mean,
So what's the
yeah,
takeaway, Mello?
the internet didn't change gambling distribution. It essentially changed the gambling design, and I think the gambling design creates the ebb and flow of the new customer. And so, depending on the attraction of these games, which we all essentially grew up on, the younger people would then find them somewhat more engaging.
Yeah, so it's faster games, cleaner mechanics, streaming culture, short attention spans, which I feel like that's maybe not a good thing in our culture today, but certainly where we're at.
Yeah, did you read that study about how social media makes us all depressed? Anyway, that's an entirely different topic. But
Surprise, surprise.
and underneath all of it, the same psychology still exists. Instead of really gamificating the game, they gamblificated. I just created that. A game that we all played and we all had
Trademark.
on, you know, there you go. We all had on our very first computers, really.
Yeah, and it goes back to the perception that you probably can't deny players engage long enough to try again. And to your point about games that we played as kids, like I could look back at some simple, really like Pong. That was one of the earliest games, right? And it was so simple. You just need to move the thing up and down and block the ball, right?
Yep. Did you know a fun fact about Pong is the person who created Pong also is the one who was one of the people who created WagerWorks, who is the reason why we are here today.
Who was that person? I don't think I knew this.
Yeah, the Atari guy.
Ted Dabney or Nolan Bushnell?
Oh, there it is. Yeah,
He was associated with WagerWorks.
Alcorn. I think it's Alan Alcorn. Okay, so
I do remember
Alan
a trivia question back in the day. You just Alcorn reminded me we had a trivia question. We did like a scavenger hunt. Do you remember that? Where we used to go around the entire city, and one of my memories, I remember someone had to drink a half-gallon of milk. Were you there during those ones?
Yeah, that was right before I got there, and lots of people got sick. Yeah,
I remember the person. I'm trying to think who did it, but someone drank it, and the whole rest of the day they were just going like, "Oh!" And I think they were lactose intolerant or something like that. They were like in misery the rest of the day. I don't know whose idea that was. It might have been a Carmen Tan. Shout out to Carmen, or maybe it was Betsy. I can't remember. Shout out to Betsy as well. One of the two, I think, were part of that. It was it was great in theory, but it was really really funny. So,
so let me get this all correct. So, do you remember the Odyssey slot machines?
Yes.
With the hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Alan Alcorn was the co-founder and VP of engineering at Silicon Gambling in the 90s. So he was actually part of the whole, the hands on the video poker and stuff like that. And so through that, through Silicon Gambling becomes WagerWorks. WagerWorks essentially gets purchased by IGT. Long story short, that's why we're here. So, I don't know if that's 5 steps. What's the Kevin Bacon game?
6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, I don't know if that's 5 or 6 degrees from Pong to IGT and to us, but it's pretty close.
That could be a segment we should add to this, right? See how far we'll pick a thing and see how many degrees of separation is, right?
Yeah,
Like a gambling game. All right. So questions for the audience. What's more engaging? Traditional casino games or internet native gambling games? Love to hear from you.
Yeah, and remember to always gamble responsibly and don't ever spend more than you can afford.
Yes. And thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good day.